You've found nightfall murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. The mansion's great door yielded with a groan, exhaling a breath of trapped centuries that struck my face, stale and cloying. My torch beam sliced through the gloom of the foyer, illuminating motes dancing in the dead air, settling upon the velvet shroud of dust coating shattered furniture remnants. An olfactory signature of rot and desiccated timber permeated the space. Instantly, the knowledge solidified. This was no mere derelict pile. Years I'd dedicated to poring over local chronicles, yet never had I stood solitary within a nexus so thick with whispers of sequestered truths and unquiet shades. I craved unfiltered revelation. Locking the car, a distant metal sentinel, I deposited my pack near the threshold, sealing my intent to witness firsthand. My initial day unfolded in hushed exploration. Beyond the entrance hall, behind a tattered drape that crumbled at my touch, stretched a corridor veiled in dust, leading towards the cavernous maw of a drawing room. Each footfall on the protesting floorboards sent echoes scattering like startled birds. The drawing room itself was dominated by a hearth of cyclopean proportions, grander than any I'd conceived. Sweeping aside veils of cobweb, I uncovered a massive coat of arms carved into the stone above the mantelpiece, the emblem of the noble dynasty whose name clung to this edifice like ivy. Time had fractured its edges, leached color from its tinctures, yet the shield and crown remained discernible, a heraldic beast gnawed by decay. A faint scrabbling sound, perhaps mice nesting deep within the walls, disturbed the silence near the room's periphery. I filed it away. Orientation was the immediate imperative. At first appraisal, the furnishings, draped in spectral white sheets, seemed merely dormant. Carved chair legs peeked out, intricate marquetry, patterned tabletops, and walls were lined with portraits whose painted gazes were adhesive, following my every move. A disquieting sensation arose whenever my own reflection flickered across their varnished surfaces, a stark reminder of my intrusion. My palms grew slick, my throat constricted, though I fought to maintain a scholar's composure. Retreating to the corridor, I discovered the main staircase ascending into shadow. Its dark wood banister felt tacky, coated in years of grime beneath my exploring hand. Each riser sighed under my weight, a strained chorus accompanying my ascent. The upper landing offered more ancestral portraits, men and women corseted in bygone fashions, their expressions uniformly severe, eyes that seemed not to see but to pierce. One face, a study in rigid authority, resonated with the legends I'd absorbed. A forbidding patriarch, eternally bound to these halls, forever seeking an elusive quarry. I ventured into the first bedchamber on the left. The air hung heavy, stagnant, suggesting decades untouched. A skeletal bed frame stood naked, its mattress long vanished. The window, an impenetrable square, was sealed fast with weathered planks. In one corner sat a modest, unadorned dresser, suffocated by dust. Its drawers, pulled open with a reluctant screech, gaped empty. The wardrobe yielded nothing but a single fractured hanger. I withdrew, trying the adjacent room. The narrative repeated: dust, abandonment, an utter absence of personal effects. The remainder of the afternoon was consumed by this methodical reconnaissance. I unearthed a library, its towering shelves largely denuded. A few derelict volumes lay scattered like fallen soldiers, their pages damp, web-encrusted, smelling acridly of decaying paper. My torchlight snagged on fragmented lines concerning local genealogies, but neglect had rendered most script illegible. Near the rear wall hung an ancient tapestry, frayed and bearing the ubiquitous family crest. The shield design was rent in places, as if clawed at by desperate hands. A diminutive shape embroidered in one corner hinted at another insignia, yet it was too faded, too obscured by grime to decipher. As evening bled into night, I established my meager camp, a sleeping bag unfurled on the hard foyer floor, strategically close to the entrance. Escape route secured. Chill seeped from the fractured walls, wrapping around me. Silence reigned for a time, thick and expectant. Then, near midnight, a soft, rhythmic thumping began overhead. Footfalls, it sounded like, pacing one of the second-floor rooms. Clutching my torch, I crept upwards, the beam carving a nervous path. Moonlight filtered weakly through chinks in boarded windows, striping the corridor in eerie bars. The sound led me towards the landing's far end, past the chambers I'd already surveyed, culminating at a locked door. The handle resisted, solid and unyielding. Pressing my ear to the dense wood, I detected a low, protracted creak, followed by an abrupt, profound silence. Minutes stretched, marked only by the frantic drumming in my chest, the sweat beading on my palms, the shallowness of my breath. Nothing more stirred. Eventually, defeated, I retreated to my cold bedroll. Morning light, thin and grey, spurred a new resolve. Armed with a small crowbar, I returned to the defiant door. The wood groaned under pressure. Hinges shrieked in protest. After several forceful attempts, the frame splintered, granting access. Beyond lay not a room, but a narrow passage terminating in another flight of stairs, ascending towards the attic. The air here felt compressed, heavier, tasting of stagnation. My light swept across old picture frames, leaning haphazardly against the walls. Glass lay shattered, and within some frames, only blank voids remained where faces should have been. A familiar tightening gripped my throat as I spotted the family crest painted directly onto the plaster near the attic threshold. The same shield, the same crown, yet the pigment seemed fresher, less obscured by dust, almost deliberately preserved. An unsettling anomaly without ready explanation. The attic door creaked open onto a constricted staircase. The air thickened further, catching in my lungs, forcing a cough. At the summit, a sprawling space unfolded, choked with forgotten relics, hulking trunks, shrouded furniture, fractured statuary. I navigated the debris-strewn floor. One immense chest remained stubbornly locked. I deferred its investigation, prioritizing a general survey. Then, my light fell upon something peculiar, a small, dust-laden table supporting a solitary candle holder. Directly beneath it, etched into the floorboards, was the family crest once more, the size of a dinner plate. Its grooves were distinct, almost sharp, as if repeatedly traced by an obsessive hand. Running my fingers along the incised lines, I felt their surprising definition in the aged wood. From a shadowed corner, a faint scratching intruded, the sound of furtive movement. I directed my beam towards the source, revealing only stacked crates and the play of deeper shadows. A sudden, acute awareness of my own heartbeat, a frantic drum against my ribs, urged retreat. My pulse felt erratic, loud in the oppressive silence. I backed away, descended the narrow stairs, and secured the attic door behind me. Descending further, back into the main corridor, I glanced again at the crest painted on the wall below the attic stairs. Did it seem brighter now? Not dramatically incandescent, but subtly more visible, as if the morning light lent it an internal charge. I rubbed my eyes, dismissing it as a trick of perception, even touched the paint, cool and inert. Yet, descending the main staircase, a knot of unease tightened in my gut. That night, seeking a different locus, I relocated to the drawing room. The colossal fireplace offered a psychological anchor. Battery-powered lanterns cast pools of flickering light, making the vast room seem even larger, its corners dissolving into impenetrable shadow. And again, near the midnight hour, movement sounded above. Perhaps the attic, perhaps a second-floor chamber. This time, however, it was accompanied by a soft, distinct click, the unmistakable sound of a lock disengaging. My gaze snapped towards the corridor entrance. Dousing my lantern, I stood rigid, scarcely breathing. The clicking ceased. A moment later, a faint scraping resonated, like a heavy chair being dragged across floorboards. My limbs felt leaden, resistant, but compulsion won. Gripping the torch, I advanced towards the staircase, its beam probing the darkness ahead. The corridor lay empty. Upwards, the stairs revealed no shape, no motion, yet a palpable cold draft flowed downwards, raising gooseflesh on my arms. I ascended, compelled to investigate the second floor. The upper corridor felt altered. The air was distinctly colder, the floorboards beneath my feet strangely damp. I checked each room systematically. They remained as I'd first found them, empty, silent repositories of dust, except for one. A bedroom door, previously closed, now stood ajar, the same vacant chamber I'd inspected on my initial pass. But now, nestled in the far corner, sat a chair. A small wooden chair with an embroidered seat. I was certain it hadn't been there before. Dust coated its arms, yet the seat cushion appeared incongruously clean, recently brushed. My torchlight interrogated the surrounding floor, searching for footprints, any sign of passage. There was nothing. A wave of nausea churned within me. The following day became a hunt for tangible evidence. I ransacked closets, forced open stiff cabinet doors, sifted through brittle, half-rotted ledgers. Most were blank, their secrets surrendered to mold and time. I did discover a collection of coats hanging in a wardrobe near the entrance hall, each bearing the familiar embroidered crest. One retained surprisingly lustrous brass buttons. A small cache of letters surfaced, their ink faded to near invisibility. Fragmentary phrases emerged. Family duty, upper rooms. Tantalizing hints, but offering no coherent narrative. Around midday, pausing for a meager ration from my pack, I sat near a window, seeking better light. My gaze snagged on something new, the coat of arms subtly carved into the stone window ledge itself. A faint outline, almost missed. But looking closer, concentrating, I perceived a slight, almost imperceptible luminescence tracing the incised lines. My eyes watered. I blinked hard, questioning my senses. The glow persisted. weak, ethereal, yet undeniably present. By the fourth night, the mansion's tension was a physical pressure. Sleep became a shallow, fractured state, easily shattered by the building's nocturnal groans and sighs. The slightest creak jerked me upright in my sleeping bag. Around 2 a.m, I awoke to what sounded like a faint voice, or perhaps merely the wind keening through unseen fissures. I lay perfectly still, breath held captive, straining to hear. Then came the click, that same precise sound of a turning lock. Resolve hardened within me, overriding the tremor in my limbs, the dryness in my mouth. Flashlight in hand, I moved towards the sound's origin in the upper corridor. The door to the attic stairs stood open. I distinctly remembered securing it. My beam illuminated the threshold, revealing fresh footprints in the thick dust layer. Not my own. They were slightly larger, their spacing suggesting a recent, deliberate descent. My stomach clenched. Slowly, cautiously, I ascended the narrow stairs, each step threatening to splinter beneath my weight. Torchlight trembled in my grip. At the top, the crest carved into the floorboards greeted me. This time, there was no ambiguity. A faint, cool light outlined every groove. My heart hammered against my ribs. Kneeling, I reached out. The carved lines felt unnervingly warm to the touch. A low shuffling sound emanated from behind the stack of crates. I swung the beam in that direction, nothing but deeper shadows, the stale scent of confinement. Standing abruptly, knees weak, breath coming in ragged bursts, I felt it, an undeniable presence, as if someone stood just behind me, unseen. My skin prickled with cold dread. I fled the attic, slamming the door shut, the sound echoing unnaturally in the stairwell. Day 5 brought a dawning realization. The crest was omnipresent. It manifested everywhere, carved into chair legs, stitched into curtain borders, painted onto obscure walls, even etched minutely into the corners of mirrors. A pervasive, obsessive sigil. Was my perception fraying? I clung to the tactile reality. I could see it, touch it. Fear began to transmute into a kind of febrile fixation. What rituals had this family practiced? Why this relentless symbol? Was the patriarch truly still pacing these confines? My focus narrowed onto the attics. Plural. The mansion was a labyrinth, its wings vast, concealing sections I hadn't yet breached. On the 6th day, near the mansion's rear, I located another locked door, guarding a second attic staircase. Fresh scratch marks marred the wood around the knob, suggesting frantic attempts to escape from within. My crowbar made short work of the lock. Hinges screamed as stale air rushed out. A single high window admitted a solitary shaft of dusty light into another repository of forgotten possessions. And there, inevitably, was the crest, carved into the floor. This iteration appeared more elaborate, the lines deeper, bearing faint vestiges of original color. Gazing upon it sent a peculiar tingling sensation crawling up the back of my neck. That night, sleep in the drawing room was impossible. Every settle and groan of the house jolted me. My heartbeat seemed to reverberate off the oppressive walls. Suddenly, a door slammed shut somewhere deep within the mansion's structure. I scrambled up, torch beam cut out wildly through the dark, and raced into the corridor. The main entrance remained secure, but a side door leading onto a small, overgrown patio stood open to the night. I shone my light outside, tangled weeds, undisturbed earth. Slamming the door, I slid the bolt home, my hands trembling violently. Then, footsteps sounded directly overhead, emanating from the second-floor room with the large fireplace. Logic screamed retreat, but a morbid curiosity propelled me upward once more. The corridor lay empty. Entering the fireplace room, I saw that the ashes within the hearth looked disturbed, recently poked or sifted through. Crouching, I ran my fingers through the cold char. No warmth, no sign of recent fire. As I straightened, a jolt went through me. The large portrait of the patriarch above the mantelpiece seemed subtly tilted, askew. My flashlight beam caught the lower corner of the heavy frame, revealing a hint of the crest, glowing with that same faint, unnatural light. Adrenaline surged, cold and sharp. My stomach twisted. Locking the room behind me, I fled back to the relative safety of my sleeping bag. By the 7th day, appetite had deserted me. My nerves felt raw, frayed. My eyes burned with sleeplessness. I spent the morning circling the mansion's exterior, seeking respite from the claustrophobic interior. Weeds choked the grounds. Thorns snagged at my clothes. The windows stared back like vacant eyes, the entire edifice seemingly observing my every move. I noted several boarded-up entrances, but little else of consequence. Re-entering the house, the air struck me as colder than before, my breath misting faintly. That night, the inevitable scraping sound returned, issuing from the main attic corridor. Clenching my fists, a desperate resolve took hold. I would confront whatever resided there. Ascending the stairs, ignoring the violent trembling in my legs, my torch swept across the dusty walls. The attic door was cracked open. Stepping inside, I aimed the beam into the cluttered darkness. A shape darted behind a large trunk. A shuffle, then a soft thud. My mouth was parchment dry. Forcing one foot before the other, I approached the trunk. Shadows pooled behind it. Then, the massive trunk rocked slightly, inexplicably. I stumbled backward. The crest on the floor pulsed with light, each carved line luminous. My pulse hammered in my temples. From somewhere near the high rafters, a low, mournful sigh drifted down. I spun around, beam searching frantically. Nothing. Only dust, decay, and the suffocating weight of unseen occupancy. My breathing hitched, turning shallow and ragged. Enough. I had seen enough. I bolted from the attic, slamming the door with finality, the sound swallowed by the oppressive silence. Downstairs, my body felt battered, exhausted, sweat soaking through my shirt. Rational thought fractured. I hastily gathered essential items, relocating my sleeping gear back to the foyer's cold comfort. My intention had been a longer stay, but the mansion's presence was becoming overwhelming, corrosive. I feared for my sanity, haunted by the omnipresent, watchful symbol. The following morning, driven by a need for documentation, I systematically photographed the crests, carved, painted, woven, the bleak corridors, the ominous attic entrances, the Stern family portraits, evidence for the archives, proof for myself. Then, without a backward glance, I walked out into the daylight. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm until I reached the car, its familiar interior a sanctuary against the mansion's brooding darkness. Those photographs remain filed with my research notes. Looking at them resurrects the chill, the nocturnal footsteps, the spectral glow of the crest. I recall the scratching, the palpable sense of being perpetually followed. I entered that mansion seeking empirical data, objective truth. I departed laden with unanswerable questions, and the chilling certainty that the place is not dormant. The patriarch's influence lingers, interwoven with the persistent energy of the family sigil. Science offers no vocabulary for what I witnessed, heard, felt. Yet even now, closing my eyes conjures the image of that crest, glowing faintly in the suffocating dark, and my pulse quickens anew. The forest's deep hush cracked open with the first retort of gunfire, a violent punctuation that sent a panicked flurry of wings towards the indifferent sky. I became stone, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. This pilgrimage into wilderness, meant for quiet contemplation and the untangling of city-knotted thoughts, had just become a theater of peril. Earlier, under the auspices of dawn, I'd navigated my car towards a whisper of a trailhead, found through digital breadcrumbs online. It promised vistas that stole breath and paths that tested sinew, an ideal crucible for a day's solitary communion with the wild. Hours unfolded in a perfect rhythm, the air crisp and tasting of decay and renewal, the percussion of fallen leaves beneath my boots, a profound solitude, the city's clamor, a distant memory. But that solitude now curdled into vulnerability. Rooted, straining to decipher the wood's sudden, hostile language, the truth struck hard. Miles from any road, the digital umbilical cord severed by absent signal, sharing this vast, indifferent space with unseen menace, armed and volatile. A frantic negotiation began in my mind. A hunter, perhaps? A stray shot? Yet the season was wrong. The calendar pages bare of sanctioned hunts, and a deeper tremor, a gut-level certainty, refuted the easy explanation. That sound, too near, too sharp, possessing an unnerving deliberation. Again, the air split. Closer. The report was chased by a raw cascade of shouts, the syllables lost to distance but the fury unmistakable. Pure instinct propelled me earthward, scrambling behind the gnarled sanctuary of an ancient oak, shrinking myself against its rough bark. Through a lattice of branches, I scanned the woods, the dense tapestry of ferns and saplings. Moments ago, a study in emerald and gold, now felt suffocating, a labyrinth harboring unseen threats. My breath hitched, a traitorous sound I fought to swallow. Then, movement. 50 yards distant, two figures materialized from the undergrowth, clad in the disruptive patterns of camouflage. Rifles held ready, they moved with a predator's focus, their gaze sweeping the forest floor. Trespassers, violating the wild's sanctity. Poachers, their agitated energy, the tension coiling in their shoulders, spoke of pursuit, not of beast, but of man. I pressed myself into the oak, willing the bark to absorb me, to render me invisible. They drew nearer, their voices gaining clarity, slicing through the strained silence. Couldn't have gone far, one rasped, a gravelly sound that grated on the quiet air. Not bleeding like that. Can't let him slip, the other bit out, his voice taut as wire. He talks, we're finished. My thoughts ignited, racing. Not fur or feather, but flesh and blood. Someone who witnessed their transgression. Someone now wounded, hunted. And I, Ilara, adrift in their lethal game. Prudence screamed retreat, melt back the way I came, find the car, escape. But a stubborn countercurrent tugged within me, a refusal to simply evaporate. Someone hurt, alone, I might be the only flicker of hope in their encroaching darkness. A deep inhalation. A silent commitment sealed. Everything tilted on that axis. The moment their backs were turned, their focus fixed ahead, I slipped away, moving counter to their path, eyes peeled for the ghost they hunted. The forest held its breath, unnervingly still. I moved like smoke, scanning tree trunks, the loamy earth, searching for a misplaced stone, a snapped twig, the subtle signature of hurried passage. Minutes stretched, elastic and tense. Then I saw it, a visceral smear of crimson against the grey bark of a beech, chest high, blood. Bile rose, hot and bitter, but I pushed onward, following the grim, intermittent trail as deeper into the woods. The murmur of water grew, resolving into the rush of a narrow stream carving through the trees. And there he was, slumped against a moss-slicked boulder, a man, perhaps 40 years weathered, his shirt a dark, spreading stain. His face, etched with pain, was bleached of color. Seeing me, his eyes widened, a flare of primal fear, a hand instinctively scrabbling at his side. My own hands lifted, palms open, empty. I want to help. The whisper barely audible above the stream song. Those men, they're hunting you? A faint nod, a release of tension in his posture. Silas, he gasped, the name riding on shallow breaths. Warden, stumbled onto them. Illegal outfit, big, dangerous. Dropping to my knees beside him, I took in the wound. A bullet had torn through his shoulder. Copious bleeding, yes, but perhaps not immediately fatal if tended. Yet blood loss weakens, disorients. Here, in this untamed expanse, even lesser wounds could prove lethal. We need to move, I stated, already shucking my pack. Can you walk? He nodded again, teeth clenched against a wave of pain as I eased him upright. I worked quickly, binding the wound with supplies from my rudimentary first aid kit, the fabric quickly darkening. Then, letting him lean heavily against me, we began our retreat. Progress was a torment of slowness. Every twig snap echoed like a gunshot. Every rustle of leaves screamed pursuit. No clear plan formed, only the desperate imperative. Distance, and perhaps higher ground, a prayer for a signal. 20 minutes crawled by. Then, voices, carried thin on the breeze. They were on our scent. There, Silas breathed, pointing a trembling finger towards a steep, rock-strewn incline. Cave system. Might lose them. A gamble. Darkness. Disorientation. The risk of becoming permanently lost. But the sound of pursuit was a spur, leaving no other path. We scrambled upward, Silas's every step an agony. We reached the dark maw of the cave just as a shout erupted below. Seen. Without a backward glance, we plunged into the subterranean black. The ensuing hours dissolved into a phantasmagoria, stumbling through unseen passages, the chilling drip of water, the suffocating dark, punctuated by heart-stopping pauses, listening for the hunter's tread. Silas, my wounded guide, navigated by instinct and fading memory, his strength visibly leaching away. Finally, a narrow fissure opened into a larger chamber, dimly lit by an unseen source high above. It was a space perhaps the size of a small room. Silas sagged against the cold stone wall, his breathing a ragged soar. "This is it," I murmured, the admission tasting like defeat. We make our stand here." He met my gaze, his eyes grim but resolute. "Back up, piece. In my boot," he rasped. "Know how to use one?" I shook my head, the memory of a tin duck gallery at some forgotten carnival, my only reference. A weary sigh escaped him. He talked me through the mechanics, the cold, alien weight of the pistol settling into my palm, heavy with dread. We didn't wait long. Bootsteps echoed from the passage, growing louder, closer. I wedged myself behind a broad stalagmite, my heart a frantic bird against my ribs, convinced its drumming would betray us. The first hunter eased into the cavern, rifle sweeping the shadows. I held my breath, finger trembling near the trigger, praying for an alternative that wasn't coming. Suddenly, a clatter from above, loose scree cascading down, startling the man. In that sliver of distraction, Silas exploded from his concealment, launching himself at the hunter. A deafening blast shook the cavern as the rifle discharged. For a sickening moment, suspended in the echoing chaos, I didn't know who had fallen. Then the second hunter burst in, rifle finding Silas instantly. Time warped, stretched thin. I saw the tightening finger, the lethal intent. Without conscious thought, I stepped clear of the rock and fired. The pistol bucked, the shot flying wild, but the sudden threat was enough. The hunter pivoted towards me, a fatal hesitation. It gave Silas the instant he needed to bring him down. In the ensuing scramble, fueled by adrenaline and sheer desperation, I found the coil of utility rope in my pack. We bound them, their resistance surprisingly weak, subdued more by shock than our clumsy efforts. As the hormonal tide receded, the enormity crashed down. I sank onto the cold cave floor, tremors racking my body. Silas slumped beside me, pale but lucid. "You did good, Ilara," he said, his voice low. "Not many would stop, not for a stranger." A shaky smile touched my lips. Guess I saw too many heroes on screen growing up. A new sound penetrated the cave's quiet, a rhythmic whirring, growing steadily louder. Helicopter blades. A grin split Silas's weary face. "Back up," he breathed. "Missed my check-in. They came looking." The sound intensified, and then, startlingly, sunlight pierced the gloom. A fissure high in the cavern ceiling, unnoticed until now, offered a window to the sky. Within minutes, figures rappelled down on ropes, their arrival signaling the end of our harrowing passage. The days afterward were a blur of sterile rooms and quiet questions from rangers and officers. The full picture emerged: a sophisticated poaching syndicate, preying on endangered creatures, dismantled because we'd stumbled into its dark heart. Silas recovered, ensuring my part wasn't overlooked. Yet the true reward wasn't recognition, but the quiet certainty that, faced with unexpected darkness, I hadn't turned away. Now the forest remains my sanctuary, but I walk its paths differently. My pack is heavier, equipped with better tools, a satellite phone. My eyes are wider, scanning not just for beauty, but aware that the trail ahead might hold more than just the promised view. It might hold the precipice of the unexpected, and the chance, once again, to choose. The groan of ancient floorboards beneath my feet resonated through the cabin. a low thrum vibrating up my legs, amplifying the profound solitude of this forested haven, or what I had believed to be solitude. As the sun bled its final colors below the serrated edge of the pines, elongating shadows into grasping fingers across the clearing, a flicker near the woodline snagged my attention. In that instant, a visceral chill snaked through me. My sanctuary was poised on the precipice of becoming a snare. Months I had yearned for this reprieve. The city's relentless cacophony, the ceaseless grind, the weight of expectation, it had eroded me. Discovering the advertisement for this isolated dwelling, nestled deep beyond connectivity's reach, felt like uncovering a hidden spring. No signal bars, no digital tethers, only the elemental dialogue between myself and the wild. The initial 48 hours unfolded in a tranquil rhythm. I traversed moss-carpeted trails, lost myself in novels beside the hearth's warm pulse, and surrendered to sleep deeper than any I'd known in years. Silence, thick and restorative, was punctuated only by the susurrus of wind-stirred leaves or the distant melancholic cry of a hawk. It began on the third evening. I lingered on the cabin's modest porch, a glass of ruby wine cradled in my hand, observing the sky's ephemeral masterpiece, a riot of incandescent orange and bruised lavender. With the descent of true dark, the woods seemed to inhale, the shadows pooling into something tenebrous, almost sentient. That's when I perceived it, an anomaly of motion against the static backdrop of trees. A deer, perhaps, my mind initially offered, but the movement repeated, sharper this time, possessing a scale and deliberation inconsistent with woodland fauna. A frantic drummer took up residence behind my ribs. My wineglass found the rough planking beside me, its presence suddenly precarious. Slowly, I rose, pupils straining against the encroaching gloom. "Hello?" The query escaped my lips, a thin, wavering thread in the vast quiet. "Is anyone out there?" The silence that answered felt stretched taut, pregnant with unspoken intent. One hesitant step carried me towards the cabin door, instinct screaming for sanctuary, for the solid reassurance of lock and bolt. My fingers brushed the cool metal of the knob just as the sharp crack of a breaking twig split the evening air. My head snapped around. There, precisely at the clearing's boundary, stood a silhouette. Even swallowed by twilight, the form registered as masculine, tall, wide of shoulder, features lost to the penumbra. He remained utterly immobile, a statue carved from shadow, observing me. Fear, cold and absolute, turned my blood to sludge, my limbs to stone. For an eternity compressed into seconds, we existed in that frozen tableau, the watcher and the watched. Then he shifted, taking a single deliberate step forward, shattering the fragile stasis. I launched myself backward, slamming the heavy door shut, my fingers scrabbling desperately with the lock. The deadbolt shot home with a satisfying thunk, followed by the rattle of the security chain, a flimsy prayer against the unknown. "Go away!" My voice, projected through the wood, aimed for ferocity but trembled with underlying panic. "I've already called the police." A hollow fabrication. The very isolation I'd craved now mocked me, severing any lifeline to help. I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. Retreating from the door, my thoughts scattered like startled birds. His motive? A disoriented hiker? Or something far more predatory? A soft thump against the cabin's exterior wall made me flinch violently. Another followed, farther along. He was circling, probing, like a wolf testing the perimeter for fold. Adrenaline propelled me to the kitchen, where my hand closed around the heftiest knife in the block. It felt absurdly inadequate, a toy against the encroaching dread, yet it was something. The cabin, once a cozy refuge, now seemed claustrophobic, its windows vulnerable eyes, its corners potential concealment. I moved with frantic purpose, room to room, verifying locks, yanking curtains closed against the oppressive dark. Passing a living room window, a face materialized against the glass, inches from mine. A choked scream tore from my throat as I stumbled back, the knife nearly slipping from my grasp. His visage, starkly illuminated for a heartbeat, was etched with neglect. A tangled beard, framing feral eyes that seemed to possess their own luminescence. A grotesque parody of a smile twisted his lips, sending ice water through my veins. "Let me in." His voice, muffled by the pain, was a low rasp. "It's getting cold." My head shook in frantic negation as I backed further away. "Leave!" I yelled, the word brittle. "There's nothing here for you." A laugh, devoid of mirth, scraped against the night. "Oh, but there is," Silas countered, the name forming unbidden in my mind for this nightmare figure. "Warmth, company. I've been solitary for such a very long time." The implication coiled in my gut, visceral and terrifying. This wasn't mere theft, it was a hunger far more primal. I fled to the bedroom, the last defensible space, locking the door behind me. My mind raced, grappling for a strategy. The cabin felt solid, yet how long could wood and metal withstand determined malice? My gaze swept the room, desperate for an improvised weapon. It landed on the bedside lamp, heavy, dense wood. It would have to suffice. Wrenching the plug from the wall, I gripped its base, the knife held tight in my other hand. Thus armed, I waited, muscles screaming with tension, ears straining for the slightest indication of breach. Time stretched, becoming elastic and agonizing. Sporadic sounds punctuated the silence. The crunch of footsteps on gravel outside, the groan of a porch step under weight. Each noise jolted my already frayed nerves. As the night deepened, profound exhaustion warred with terror. My arms throbbed from the strain of holding my makeshift arsenal, yet lowering them felt unthinkable. The initial surge of adrenaline waned, leaving behind a nauseating tremor. Just as the tension threatened to unravel me completely, a new sound shattered the stillness. The unmistakable jagged report of shattering glass. He was inside. My grip tightened convulsively on the lamp and knife. I flattened myself against the wall beside the bedroom door, a cornered animal preparing for its final stand. Footsteps echoed through the cabin, measured, unhurried. little bird, where did you fly?" Silas crooned, the playful tone nauseatingly discordant. "Don't worry now, I won't hurt you excessively." Hot tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them back with furious resolve. Weakness was a luxury I could not afford. I had to be ready. The footfalls drew nearer. Floorboards just outside the door protested under his weight. "I know you're in there," he murmured, his voice intimate, chillingly close. "Let's not complicate things, shall we?" The doorknob jiggled violently. I held my breath, every fiber of my being coiled tight. Then, with a percussive explosion of splintering wood, the door flew inward. Silas stood framed in the ruined doorway, darkness clinging to him like a shroud, a crowbar clutched in his fist. Time warped, elongating the moment. I registered the flicker of surprise in his eyes as he located me, pressed against the wall beside the threshold. I saw the upward arc of his arm begin, the crowbar poised to strike. He never completed the motion. A raw scream, born of terror and primal fury, ripped from my lungs as I swung the heavy lamp with every ounce of strength I possessed. It connected with his skull with a sickening wet thud. He staggered, momentarily stunned, but not felled. Without pause, propelled by sheer survival instinct, I lunged, driving my shoulder hard into his torso. We crashed to the floor in a chaotic tangle of limbs, the knife and crowbar clattering away across the wooden planks. A desperate grapple ensued, a frantic struggle for dominance. His brute strength was undeniable, but my movements were fueled by the incandescent energy of desperation. Somehow, leveraging panic into power, I found myself astride him. My hand scrabbled, found the lamp again, and I brought it down hard against his head. Once, twice, a third time. Finally, his resistance ceased. He went slack beneath me. I scrambled clear, breath tearing through my lungs in ragged, painful gasps. He lay inert, a dark stain blossoming on the floorboards around his head. A horrifying fear gripped me. Had I killed him? Then, the faint but perceptible rise and fall of his chest. Unconscious, relief, potent and debilitating, turned my knees to water. Staggering upright, I scanned the room wildly. He needed to be secured before consciousness returned. Locating rope in a nearby closet, my trembling fingers managed to bind his wrists and ankles. Then, drawing on reserves I hadn't known existed, I hauled his dead weight out onto the porch, lashing him securely to one of the thick support posts. Only then, the immediate threat neutralized, did the dam break. I collapsed onto the porch steps, great shuddering sobs racking my frame as the enormity of the night's horror washed over me in a suffocating wave. As the first tentative strokes of dawn painted the eastern sky in delicate washes of rose and gold, the distant growl of an engine disturbed the morning's fragile peace. A pickup truck materialized on the winding track leading to the cabin, the property manager, arriving for his routine weekly inspection. I waved a frantic semaphore as the vehicle drew closer. His initially cheerful expression dissolved into stunned alarm as his gaze took in the tableau. Me, tear-streaked and disheveled beside the bound, unconscious figure lashed to the porch post. The ensuing hours became a disorienting montage. The flashing lights of police cruisers, the arrival of an ambulance, the detached cadence of questions and statements, the intermittent glare of flashbulbs transforming the cabin into an official scene. While a paramedic gently assessed me for injuries, a detective approached, his face etched with gravity. "You were incredibly fortunate," he stated, his tone somber. "This individual, Silas Croft, we've been pursuing him for months, suspected in a string of similar assaults in remote locations like this." I could only nod, numb, adrift in a sea of exhaustion and delayed shock. "You did well," the detective added, his voice softening slightly. "You survived. Ultimately, that's all that matters." Later, as uniformed officers led Silas, now conscious and cuffed, toward a waiting patrol car. Our eyes locked for a final, charged moment. The feral wildness had receded, replaced by a sullen, impotent fury. I held his gaze, refusing to flinch, refusing to yield even that small ground. I had confronted the embodiment of my deepest fears, and emerged, scarred but standing. The sun climbed higher, bathing the clearing in impartial light as I prepared my departure. Tossing my overnight bag into the rear of the cruiser, designated to return me to the city, I cast one final glance back at the idyllic clearing, at the rustic structure that had represented a dream of escape. That dream lay shattered, the illusion of inviolable peace irrevocably broken. Yet, as I settled into the vehicle's passenger seat, a core of unexpected steel solidified within me. I had unearthed a resilience I never suspected I possessed. The wilderness had harbored a monster, but it had not conquered me. Whatever trials awaited me beyond this place, I carried the certain knowledge of my own capacity to endure. I had stared directly into the abyss and walked away, battered, yes, but unbowed. As the cabin dwindled in the rearview mirror, I closed my eyes, releasing a long, slow breath. The nightmare had ended. It was time to return home. The bank of monitors flickered awake, bathing the confined security hub of the Meridian Mall in cathode ray pallor. As Elias settled into the worn chair, anticipating another procession of silent hours, a flicker, a wrongness, on screen snagged his attention. Something fluid and dark slipped between the shuttered facades of storefronts, dissolving into the geometry of shadows as swiftly as it materialized. A jolt went through him, tightening his chest. This night, he sensed with sudden clarity, would deviate sharply from the script. Elias, 3 years guarding the slumbering Meridian, a post usually defined by its profound lack of incident, a nocturnal sanctuary perfect for quiet contemplation or the slow crawl towards an online degree. Tonight, however, the sanctuary felt breached. He tried, initially, to dismantle the image, a trick of the low light perhaps, or some nocturnal creature, a stray feline that had navigated the building's hidden arteries. Yet a deeper instinct recoiled from these easy dismissals. Nothing in his tenure resembled this fleeting silhouette. Leaning forward, his gaze swept the grid, scrutinizing each vacant corridor, each still escalator. Minutes stretched, taut and silent. Then, undeniable, a shape, obsidian against the dimness, moving with unnerving deliberation through the desolate food court. His fingers hovered inches from the phone handset. Procedure screamed for an immediate police call, a surrender of the situation to external forces. But a potent blend of curiosity and professional pride stayed his hand. A false alarm, a phantom chase, would earn him weeks of needling from his supervisor. He would investigate first. Clipping the radio to his belt, snatching the heavy flashlight, Elias pushed open the office door. The mall exhaled a profound quiet, a vacuum punctuated only by the low thrum of unseen climate systems and the rhythmic plink of water striking porcelain in some distant restroom. He moved toward the food court, his own footfalls unnervingly loud against the polished terrazzo. Every shadow seemed to writhe with potential movement. Reflections in the darkened glass of shop windows became fleeting specters that made him flinch. His grip tightened on the flashlight, its beam a solitary blade slicing the gloom. Rounding the final turn into the food court's open expanse, his breath hitched, bathed in the weak glow of emergency fixtures. Not one figure, but 3, were clustered around the central jewelry kiosk. Their forms were hunched, intent, their actions economical and swift. Elias melted back behind the broad leaves of a decorative palm, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs, certain its frantic beat must carry across the cavernous space. This wasn't opportunism, it was execution. These were professionals. He was terrifyingly outmatched. With hands that trembled betraying his outward stillness, he fumbled for the radio, thumb seeking the transmit button. Before he could depress it, a low voice sliced the silence. "Oi, you hear something?" He froze, lungs locking, every nerve ending alight. "Seen?" "Nah, just the vents." Another voice, rougher, dismissed. "Get on with it. Clock's ticking." A slow, silent exhale escaped Elias's lips. Undetected, but the reprieve brought a stark choice: retreat and call, risking their escape, or remain, observe, gather intelligence. The decision was ripped from his hands by the sharp, splintering report of shattering glass. They'd abandoned subtlety, smashing display cases now. Action was imperative. Pressing the radio close to his mouth, he spoke in a low, urgent tone. "Dispatch, this is Elias. Code 3 active, Meridian Food Court. Minimum 3 perpetrators. Requesting immediate police response." The reply crackled back instantly. "Acknowledged, Elias. Units en route. Maintain observation only. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage." Engage? The thought was laughable. His strategy was simple: concealment, observation, await the cavalry. But strategies, like glass, are fragile things. Shifting for a less obstructed view, his boot snagged the planter's heavy base. He stumbled, a clumsy lurch that sent the terracotta pot toppling. It struck the floor with a resonant crack that seemed to magnify, echoing through the mall's hollow heart. Time suspended, a held breath. Then pandemonium erupted. "What the hell was that?" barked one of the intruders. "Someone's here! Find 'em!" roared another. Elias didn't hesitate. He bolted, raw instinct propelling him away from the food court, towards the nearest marked exit. Behind him, heavy footfalls pounded in pursuit, angry shouts reverberating off the walls. His mind raced, mapping the route. Past the electronics emporium, hang a left at the defunct fountain. But as he rounded the corner, hope plummeted. A lattice of steel, the security gate, barred his path, mocking his desperation. He skidded, frantically scanning the periphery. Their pursuit was relentless, drawing closer. A novelty gift shop gaped beside him, its entrance dark. Desperate, he plunged inside, praying for sanctuary amongst the kitsch. Racks of garish t-shirts and shelves, crammed with tourist tat, formed a cluttered maze. He navigated deeper, searching. Near the back, a plain door. Employees only. He wrenched it open, slipped through, and pulled it shut. A cramped stockroom swallowed him, scarcely larger than a walk-in closet. Metal shelves groaned under stacked cartons, leaving only narrow pathways. He wedged himself behind a towering column of boxes, fighting to muffle his ragged gasps. Outside, the sounds of the search intensified. The crash of display stands, the angry sweep of merchandise. He squeezed his eyes shut, focusing his will into a silent plea. Move on. Just move on. The stockroom door groaned open. Deliberate footsteps entered the confined space. "Come on out, little mouse," a gravelly voice taunted. "We ain't gonna hurt ya, much." Elias held his breath, utterly immobile. The steps advanced, pausing mere feet away, on the other side of his cardboard shield. A tense silence stretched. Then, abruptly, the stack of boxes concealing him was violently shoved aside. He found himself staring up into the face of one of the thieves. Tall, with a jagged scar bisecting one eyebrow and eyes like chips of ice. "Well now," the man sneered, a predatory curl to his lip. "Looky what we flushed out." Pure reflex took over. Elias snatched the closest object, a hefty snow globe depicting the city skyline, and flung it with all his strength. It connected solidly against the man's temple with a wet thwack. He staggered back, spitting curses. Elias didn't pause to assess the damage. He scrambled past the stunned man, bursting back into the retail space. The other two thieves stood there, momentarily bewildered by his sudden reappearance. He exploited their hesitation, charging directly towards them. They scattered instinctively, clearing his path. He exploded out of the shop, back into the main concourse. He heard the scarred man roar behind him, the chase resuming with renewed fury. Elias ran as he'd never run before, lungs searing, legs screaming protest, fueled by a primal cocktail of terror and adrenaline. He zigzagged through the mall's arteries, taking random turns, desperate to break line of sight. Rounding a familiar bend, he saw it. Salvation. The security office. Just reach the door, lock it, wait. He poured every last ounce of energy into a final sprint, arm outstretched, fingers straining for the handle. The pounding footfalls were right behind him. His fingertips brushed the cool metal just as a crushing weight slammed into his back. The impact drove the air from his lungs, sending him sprawling onto the hard floor. Rough hands seized him, flipping him onto his back. The scarred man loomed over him, a trickle of blood tracing a path from his temple. His eyes burned with raw rage. "You're gonna regret that, pal," he snarled, raising a clenched fist. Elias squeezed his eyes shut, bracing. The blow never landed. Instead, blinding light flooded the corridor. A disembodied voice, amplified and authoritative, boomed through the mall. "Police! Building is surrounded! Exit with your hands visible!" The grip on Elias slackened. He seized the moment, driving his knee upwards with vicious force into the man's gut. The thief gasped and doubled over. Elias scrambled backward, crab-walking away, as the next few moments dissolved into a whirlwind of commands. Running feet, the unmistakable click of handcuffs. Suddenly, he was sitting on the bumper of an ambulance, a coarse blanket draped over his shoulders, a paramedic calmly checking his vitals. A detective, notepad open, approached him. "Mr. Vance," he began, his tone appreciative. "That was some fast thinking back there. Took a hell of a risk, son, but because of you, we got these individuals red-handed." Elias nodded, his mind still struggling to catch up with the night's brutal velocity. Just doing my job, he managed, the words feeling inadequate. The detective offered a thin smile. Well, your just job might have just blown open a case we've been chasing for months. This crew suspected part of a much larger operation. Your testimony, the sequence of events, could be crucial. As the first hints of dawn stained the eastern sky, violet and rose, Elias watched uniformed officers escort the subdued thieves towards waiting patrol cars. The scarred man's gaze met his for a fleeting moment as he was bundled inside, a look of pure, unadulterated defeat that Elias knew would stay with him. In that instant, something fundamental shifted within him. He wasn't merely Elias Vance, the night watchman anymore. He'd stared down genuine peril, made choices under fire that mattered, and emerged, bruised but whole. Later, giving his formal statement, Elias found his thoughts drifting. A change. Maybe it was time. The detective's words echoed. Always looking for good people. This night, this crucible, had revealed something about himself. Perhaps that path, the one demanding courage and quick thinking, was worth exploring. The Meridian would remain sealed for days, a crime scene. As Elias finally walked towards home, muscles aching, mind simultaneously exhausted and strangely energized, one truth resonated. The job, the mole, his perception of himself, none of it would ever be the same. The quiet guardian of the night was gone, replaced by someone tested, someone stronger, someone unexpectedly ready for whatever dawn might bring next. And for the first time in a very long time, Elias felt a flicker, not of fear, but of anticipation for that unknown future. The rain's insistent drumming on the car roof wasn't just sound, it was a pulse, steady until shattered by a roadside blur, a silhouette hunched against the deluge, thumb jutting like a stark question mark into the downpour, a flicker of ingrained caution instantly overridden by the stronger, older impulse to mend, to assist. The click of the door unlocking felt amplified, a tiny mechanism sealing a pact with the storm-lashed night. I invited him in, and perhaps something more ancient and unsettling along with him. My name is Elias. By trade, I'm a custodian of fragile bodies, working the quiet, draining hours at the city hospital. Compassion is my currency, a reflex honed in the small, interconnected town of my youth. But tonight, navigating the tempestuous drive home, that reflex felt less like virtue, and more like a dare flung into the teeth of the gale. He folded himself into the passenger seat, a creature sculpted from rain and desperation. Water plastered thin fabric to a wiry frame. Below a tangle of dark, sodden hair, his eyes were unsettlingly deep-set, darting with a restless energy that scanned the car's interior before finally settling, hard, on mine. Appreciate the sanctuary, he rasped, a voice like stones shifting underwater. Wouldn't wish this weather on a ghost. A practiced smile formed on my lips. No trouble. Where can I take you? His gesture was vague, a sweep of the hand towards the indistinct, rain-blurred horizon. Just onward. I'll recognize the turn. As the car merged back onto the slick, empty ribbon of highway, a dissonant note began to hum beneath the surface of my calm. His ambiguity, the coiled tension radiating from his stillness, It was a prickle of unease I tried to dismiss as fatigue, a phantom conjured by too many hours spent under harsh fluorescent lights. We drove. Silence swelled, punctuated only by the metronomic sweep of the wipers and the relentless percussion of rain. I was formulating some bland pleasantry when he spoke, his tone disconcertingly intimate. "So, Elias," he murmured, as if we were old acquaintances picking up a thread, "how does the world treat you these days?" A chill, sharp and sudden, traced its way down my vertebrae. My hands clenched the wheel, knuckles white ghosts in the dim cabin light. I hadn't offered my name. Before the question could fully form, he continued, the casual veneer peeling back to reveal something sharp-edged, knowing. "Well enough, I'd wager. In that snug little house on Sycamore Lane, Buster keeping you company, the golden shadow?" The air grew thick, heavy. Sycamore Lane, Buster, details plucked from the ether, impossible knowledge. Who in God's name are you?" The demand was meant to be forceful, but it frayed at the edges. "How do you know these things?" A low chuckle vibrated in the confined space, raising the fine hairs on my arms. "Oh, Elias, I know a great many things. Observation is a quiet passion of mine, and you've been quite the subject." My thoughts fractured, scattering like thrown gravel. A stalker, but why? For what purpose? "What do you want from me?" I fought to keep my gaze pinned to the hypnotic arc of the wipers, panic clawing at my throat. "It's never about what I want, Elias," he replied, his voice a disarming calm that was more terrifying than any threat. "It's about the undercurrents, the hidden tributaries within you, this neat, predictable life you've curated. It wears thin, doesn't it? A low thrum of dissatisfaction you pretend not to hear. That's the real reason you stopped back there. Not charity. A subconscious yearning for disruption. A little walk on the wild side." His words struck uncomfortably close, resonating with a recent, nameless restlessness I'd refused to acknowledge. But this interpretation, this was insanity. "You're wrong," I insisted, injecting a conviction I didn't possess. "It was raining. Anyone would stop for someone caught in this." He laughed again, a richer sound this time, that seemed to absorb the remaining oxygen in the car. "Ah, Elias. Always the good Samaritan. Always the plausible denial. But the static beneath the surface. We both feel it, don't we?" My grip tightened further. "I want you out of my car. Now!" "Unfortunately," he sighed, a sound weighted with mock regret, "that deviates from the script. Our shared narrative, you see, is far from its conclusion." Raw fear surged, hot and metallic. My foot instinctively pressed the accelerator, the engine straining as the car lurched forward into the blinding spray. Find lights, find people, find an anchor back to the known world. "A pointless maneuver, Elias," he observed, utterly serene amidst my panic. "There are no convenient exits on this particular stretch, just the road, the rain, and us." He was right. The highway stretched, an endless black mirror reflecting only the storm's fury. A horrifying realization washed over me. I had no idea where we were. How long had we been driving? Time felt distorted, stretched thin like old elastic. "What have you done?" My voice was a ragged whisper. "Nothing you didn't implicitly allow," came the soft reply. "You turned the key, Elias. You opened the door to possibility." As if summoned, the engine coughed, sputtered, choked, and died. We coasted to a silent halt on the shoulder, swallowed by a profound darkness beyond the rain-streaked glass. I twisted the ignition key, futile, a dead click. "Exquisite timing," the man mused, the ghost of that unsettling smile playing on his lips in the gloom. "Perhaps we should continue our discourse outside." "I'm not going anywhere," I bit out, striving for a bravery I didn't feel. He sighed again, a weary sound. Elias, still fighting the inevitable? You misunderstand the nature of this. Choice was rendered irrelevant the moment you braked for me." His hand moved towards my arm. I recoiled instinctively, fumbling for the door handle, the lock, both unresponsive, inert, trapped. "Don't resist," he murmured, his voice sinking into a hypnotic cadence. "It's much smoother if you simply yield." His fingers closed around my forearm, not cold, not hot, but charged with a peculiar energy that pulsed into me, numbing and strange. The solid lines of the dashboard blurred, the rain-streaked window dissolving into shifting washes of color. His voice seemed to spiral away, echoing as if from a great distance. "Welcome, Elias, to the chapter you subconsciously wrote. I trust you'll find the ride stimulating." I awoke adrift in the familiar territory of my own bed, sunlight filtering through the blinds. Disorientation clung like mist. The storm, the highway, the voice. Had it been a phantasmagoria spun from sheer exhaustion? My gaze drifted to the nightstand. A small rectangle of paper lay there, stark white against the dark wood, inked in an unfamiliar, slanted hand. For the lift, until next time. My breath caught. The ensuing weeks became a tightrope walk over a chasm of uncertainty. I reasoned, rationalized, stress, hallucination, a waking dream. Yet the indelible sensation remained. Something fundamental had fractured. He manifested at the edges of my perception. A fleeting profile in a passing crowd. A reflection that vanished fractionally too soon from a shop window. Gone, always gone, when I turned to fix him in my sight. New locks were installed, silent electronic eyes mounted. I even dissolved into the anonymity of a new apartment across town. Pointless gestures. His presence was a subtle pressure, an invisible weight of observation. And the deepest horror, the most insidious truth, a sliver of me, dark and hidden, thrilled to it. The sheer, unpredictable danger of it all had awakened something long buried. At the hospital, I found myself gravitating towards the frantic energy of the trauma bays, volunteering for the desperate cases, the ones that walked the knife edge. My quiet solitude fragmented into explorations of unfamiliar neighborhoods, shadowed bars, the transient company of strangers. That night felt like a key turning in a long rusted lock, opening doors to rooms within myself I hadn't known existed. Yet this newfound intensity was perpetually underscored by a low thrum of fear. Every unknown face became a potential mask for him. Every sudden noise, his approaching step. I existed in a state of hypervigilance, suspended between dread and a perverse, burgeoning anticipation. It came, as perhaps it had to, on another night draped in falling rain. Walking home late from the hospital, the streets gleaming wet and deserted under the sodium lamps. Then, I saw him, positioned beneath the solitary cone of light from a street lamp, rain tracing paths, down unseen contours, that same enigmatic smile faintly visible. Elias, his voice carried easily over the hiss of the downpour. Ready for another journey. Logic, survival, every sane instinct screamed flee, shout for help, vanish into the nearest doorway. Instead, I found myself nodding, a slow, deliberate movement, born of a terrifying confluence of fear and exhilaration. I walked towards him, towards the dark, anonymous car idling nearby, a silent understanding passing between us in the rain-washed air. The Elias who clung to safety, to the predictable shore, was dissolving. This new Elias, forged on that storm-tossed highway, stepped forward. "Where are we going?" The question was quiet, almost lost, as I slid into the passenger seat, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and something electric like ozone. He turned towards me, his eyes catching the stray light, glinting with dark amusement. "Does the map truly matter?" he countered softly. "It's the territory we explore along the way, Elias. Are you prepared to simply travel?" The car pulled away from the curb, melting into the wet, empty streets. The rain resumed its steady, hypnotic drumming on the roof. My life, I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, had taken a permanent detour. I had consciously stepped across a threshold, into a landscape painted with shadows and secrets, edged with danger, alive with a terrifying vibrancy. And though fear remained, a cold stone in my gut, the idea of turning back, of trying to latch that door shut again, felt like the most profound impossibility of all. So, take this not just as a tale, but as a resonance, a warning whispered on the wind. When the storm breaks and a solitary figure looms out of the downpour, think carefully. Think of Elias. Think of the simple act of unlatching a door. Be very sure, before you extend your hand, just who or what you might truly be welcoming into the intimate spaces of your life. Because some invitations, once accepted, are irrevocable. Some guests never leave. The rhythmic cadence of my trainers kissing pavement fractured, a dry twig's retort, sharp and sudden, somewhere behind. My stride hitched, my heart vaulted, a frantic bird against my ribs. Meridian Park, usually an exhale within the city's steel lungs, felt suddenly tight, airless, steeped in the deepening violet of twilight. A glance snatched over my shoulder, a silhouette dissolving behind the broad trunk of an oak. In that heartbeat, the familiar path of my evening run twisted into something treacherous, a stalker's game sprung from the gloaming. Clara, that's my name. Never did I imagine this devotion to motion, to the simple act of putting one foot before the other, could unravel into the single most harrowing night I'd ever know. Running has always been my sanctuary. There's a liberation in the piston work of limbs, the measured tide of breath, the periphery dissolving into streaks of color as the path ahead sharpens into singular focus. It's my purge, my solace, the mental rinse cycle after the long soak of office hours. This park, Meridian, had become my terrain since arriving in the city 3 years prior. Its veins and arteries, the winding paths, were as known to me as the lines on my palm, from the peopled arteries near the gates to the quieter capillaries threading deeper within its green heart. Evenings usually meant sticking to the illuminated, populated routes, but today's pressures had coiled tight inside me, demanding the deeper solitude the park's remote stretches offered, a choice etched now in the acid of regret. The sun, a molten coin slipping below the skyline, stretched shadows into skeletal fingers across the lawns as I entered. The usual tide of runners, dog walkers, lovers and wanderers was ebbing, drawn homeward. I drank the quiet, the cooling air a balm on my skin, striking out along my preferred trail. Perhaps 2 miles dissolved behind me when the dissonance began, subtle, insidious, a prickle of awareness, the ghost of observation raising the fine hairs along my neck. Paranoia, I chided myself, shaking it off. Yet, rounding a curve sculpted by ancient roots, I heard it. Footfalls, distinctly not my own, trailing, slightly out of sync. Instinctively, I lengthened my stride, seeking distance, only to hear those other steps accelerate, mirroring my effort. My pulse hammered, a rhythm now driven by something other than exertion. Risk and another backward look, I saw him. A figure maybe 50 yards distant, pace locked to mine. Then came the definitive crack, the sound that sheared through denial. This was no fellow runner, no mere coincidence. Pursuit, cold and deliberate. Panic flared, a chemical burned through my veins. The vulnerability crashed down, alone, deep within the park's embrace, as dusk bled into night, no one near enough to hear a cry. Fragments of a self-defense course surfaced, keys bristling between knuckles, vulnerable points, shouting, "Fire!" not help, for a better response. Futile knowledge, predicated on proximity, I desperately wanted to avoid. I broke from the path, plunging into the denser weave of trees, hoping the undergrowth would swallow me. Branches lashed my face, invisible whips in the gloom. My lungs scorched, demanding air I couldn't draw fast enough, pushing beyond any limit I'd known. Behind me, I heard him gaining, the relentless crunch of leaves, the snap of twigs. Closer, his stride longer, effortlessly consuming the ground between us. A desperate shift in strategy. Abandoning the deepening woods, I angled sharply back towards the park's more frequented areas. Light, people, safety, if only I could reach them. But he anticipated. As I burst from the tree line onto a wider graveled path, he materialized, a solid obstruction cutting off my flight. The last vestiges of daylight revealed him. Tall, sinewy, clad entirely in black, his features lost behind a mask, but his eyes, visible, stark, were what truly paralyzed. Devoid of warmth, they held a chilling focus, a predator's appraisal that turned my blood to ice. "Nowhere left to run, little rabbit," he rasped, the sound scraping against my frayed nerves. I retreated, eyes scanning wildly. A fallen branch, a loose rock, any opening. Trapped, him before me and behind, a steep, eroded bank tumbling down towards a hidden creek. A choice made in the space of a panicked breath. I turned, launched myself sideways, half running, half sliding down the treacherous slope. Reckless, yes, but the only door left open. A curse followed me down as he gave chase. The creek water, shallow but swift, was a galvanic shock, stealing breath, igniting a final surge of pure survival instinct. I clawed my way up the opposing bank, mud sucking at my feet, sodden clothes clinging like lead weights. Now I ran blind, directionless, fueled only by the imperative to create distance. The park transformed into a phantasmagoria of looming shapes and whispering shadows. Every rustle, every distant snap sent jolts of raw terror through me. Time lost meaning. Minutes stretched into an eternity of burning lungs and trembling legs. Exhaustion gnawed, but the certainty of what waited behind kept me moving. To stop was unthinkable. Then, salvation's glimmer, lights ahead, the park's edge, bordering the city streets. Safety, tangible, only a few hundred yards more. I drove myself onward, ignoring the screaming stitch in my side, the fire in my muscles. Disaster struck. My foot snagged an exposed root, sending me sprawling. Pain, white-hot and vicious, erupted in my ankle. Not broken, but twisted, useless. I struggled to rise, hearing him approach, his breathing heavy but controlled. He hadn't exhausted himself. He'd been pacing me, playing with me. His shadow stretched, engulfing me. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the end. Then, sound. Voices drifting from the street. Laughter, conversation, a group entering the park. My pursuer froze, his head snapping between me on the ground and the approaching sounds. That hesitation was my chance. Drawing on reserves I didn't know I possessed, I screamed. A raw, ragged, tearing sound, torn from the deepest well of fear and pain accumulated over the last hour. The voices ceased abruptly. Shouts of alarm followed, the thud of running feet coming closer. My attacker uttered a final venomous curse, then vanished, melting back into the park's consuming darkness. The aftermath arrived in a cacophony of sirens, the detached calm of paramedics, a barrage of questions my fractured mind struggled to process. The hospital, fluorescent and sterile, offered treatment for exhaustion, dehydration, the sprained ankle. Police took my statement, offered assurances of increased patrols, but the lack of a clear description left little hope. He was a phantom. In the ensuing days, weeks, the city I'd embraced felt alien, hostile. Every shadow seemed poised to move, every unfamiliar face a potential threat. Running, my former solace, became unthinkable. The park, a geography of fear. Slowly, painstakingly, aided by therapy, buffered by the unwavering support of friends and family, I began to stitch my life back together. Self-defense classes became a commitment, not a forgotten resolution. Pepper spray and a personal alarm became constants. Eventually, tentatively, I returned to running. Never alone, never near dusk, never in those secluded corners. The man who hunted me through Meridian Park was never found. His shadow lingers sometimes in the architecture of my nightmares, a dark shape perpetually gaining ground. But I refuse to grant that fear dominion. I am a survivor, marked but not broken. Now, when my feet find their rhythm on the pavement, I carry the acute awareness of the world's sharp edges, particularly for women navigating it alone. But I also carry my strength, hard-won resilience, and the unshakable resolve that fear will not win. because sometimes the most vital race is the one for your own life, and I intend to keep crossing the finish line. The rupture began subtly a week ago during the morning ritual before the bathroom looking glass. Preparing for the day, I met my own gaze, the familiar fatigue pooling beneath my eyes, the shadow of unshaven grit on my jaw. Nothing alarming, initially. Then, a flicker of discrepancy. My hand lifted, its mirrored counterpart followed, but with a minute, perceptible hesitation. Not a chasm in time, merely a hairline crack, yet enough to send a cold twist through my insides. I blinked, scrubbed at my eyes, attributing it to the dregs of sleep. Forsaking the mirror, I sought refuge in the kitchen. The simple act of slotting bread into the toaster, feeling strangely fraught, shadowed by an unshakable disquiet. The workday passed in a comforting blur of normalcy until my return after dusk. Stepping into the apartment, flipping switches, bathing the space in artificial light, all felt routine. Then came the bathroom, the sink, the desire to wash away the city grime. I braced myself, staring into the silvered pane, hunting for that temporal stutter. At first, congruence. Then, my right arm, moving to the tap, seemed to drag in the glass. A brief, buffering lag. My heart commenced a frantic drumming against my ribs. A constricting tension gripped my scalp. I stood frozen, drawing air deliberately through my nostrils. Retreating, I killed the light, sinking onto the sofa's familiar cushions, the silence suddenly thick with implication. Sleep offered no sanctuary that night. Each time my eyelids slid shut, the lagging reflection played behind them, a ghost image moving perpetually out of step. Around the witching hour, thirst drove me from bed. Padding into the kitchen's gloom, I glimpsed my form in the darkened window pane above the sink, only a faint silhouette against the ambient city glow. Yet behind it, I swear it, loomed a second, taller, indistinct shape, gazing intently at the back of my skull. A gasp snagged in my throat. I whirled, knuckles white against the cool countertop. Emptiness greeted me. A glacial tremor traced its way down my arms, raising the fine hairs on my nape. I backed away from the window's accusing stare, sleep utterly banished for the remainder of the night. Morning arrived, and with it, a desperate attempt at denial. I showered quickly, eyes studiously avoiding the broad expanse of the bathroom mirror, a tightness clamping around my chest, a constant need to clear a throat that felt obstructed. Dressing became an exercise in averted gazes, navigating by touch and memory rather than sight. Then, passing the small ornamental mirror in the hallway, a peripheral flicker, a presence behind me, vanished the instant I turned. The frantic percussion resumed in my chest. Keep moving, I told myself. Just fatigue, just nerves playing tricks. The relative mirrorlessness of the office offered a temporary reprieve. I anchored my focus to the monitor's glow, repeating the mantra, paranoid, simply paranoid. Lunchtime, however, necessitated a trip to the restroom, a stark chamber dominated by a wall of glass above the sinks. My reflection appeared faithful, initially, but as I leaned forward, the rush of water filling the basin, a whisper materialized beside my ear. My name breathed intimately close. My heart gave a violent lurch. I froze, hands suspended beneath the running tap, the sound of water, a roaring irrelevance. Staring fixedly at the porcelain, terror forbade me from looking up. My pulse throbbed insistently at my temples. At last, wrenching the faucet closed, I forced my gaze upward. Just me. Paler, eyes wide with a hunted look, but undeniably me. I fumbled with the paper towels, fleeing the room as if pursued. The afternoon dissolved into a haze of restless anxiety. My legs jittered beneath the desk. My mouth felt perpetually arid. I lingered late, delaying the inevitable return home. The bus journey stretched, an eternity spent staring at the grimy floor, consciously avoiding the reflective windows. Disembarking, I hurried towards my building, opting for the stairwell over the elevator's mirrored cage. Inside my apartment, the click of the lock offered scant comfort. An exhale shuddered out of me. I stood motionless for several seconds, the familiar thoracic vise tightening. Methodically, I illuminated every corner, banishing shadows. Then, collapsing onto the sofa, my eyes landed on the blank television screen opposite. A dim reflection of the room stared back. That same chilling intuition of not being alone prickled my skin. A low susurrus brushed my left ear. My name drawn out, languorous. I jolted upright, the remote nearly slipping from my grasp. A frantic scan revealed nothing. "Breathe!" I commanded myself, though my hands trembled and my throat felt raw. I lunged for the TV, turning it on, cycling through channels purely for the solace of noise. Dinner was a mechanical affair. Noodles, some forgotten chicken, consumed standing in the kitchen, gaze resolutely fixed away from the window. Appetite had fled, but I forced down a few mouthfuls. Washing the plate, the curve of the stainless steel faucet snared my reflection. My face seemed distant, recessed, swallowed by shadow. A hard blink restored normalcy, but my heart hammered against my ribs. Drying my hands, I retreated once more to the living room's relative safety. My phone became a talisman, scrolling through meaningless feeds, yet my thoughts circled relentlessly back to that temporal lag. A mental inventory surfaced. The television, a glossy picture frame, the microwave door, the hallway plate glass, the primary offender in the bathroom. Each felt latent, waiting to betray me. Decision sparked through the fear. Towels were procured, draped over the bathroom mirror, obscuring its depths. A bedsheet followed, thrown unceremoniously over the hallway glass. A fragile calm settled, momentary but welcome. I resolved on an early night, leaving every light blazing, an unnatural brightness, but preferable to the encroaching dark. Beneath the covers, fully clothed, I stared at the ceiling, hyper-attuned to the apartment's nocturnal symphony, creaking floorboards, groaning pipes. My breath came shallow, my pulse refusing to steady. After what felt like an age, a fitful, uneasy sleep claimed me. I surfaced hours later to a cold, prickling numbness crawling up my right arm. The lights glared, harsh and unwavering. Blinking against the burn, I shifted, intending to resettle. And then it returned. My name, a sibilant hiss, seemingly uttered inches away. The vice clamped down on my chest. My eyes darted around the illuminated room. Vacant. I pushed myself upright, limbs unsteady, head pounding. The thought of fleeing, of a sterile hotel room, flickered, but the lateness of the hour and the gnawing certainty that it wouldn't matter held me captive. Dawn found me scrolling through clinic websites, seeking an appointment, any appointment. Embarrassment warred with terror as I vaguely described severe anxiety to the receptionist. End of the week, she offered. Days stretched before me like a barren wasteland. Leaving the apartment felt like running a gauntlet. Eyes fixed on the pavement, I navigated the sidewalk, acutely aware of shop windows flashing past. Sweat slicked my skin. A near collision with a pedestrian jolted me, a consequence of my determinedly downward gaze. At work, the urge to confide battled the fear of ridicule. Would anyone believe this descent into unreality? I sat rigid, foot tapping a frantic rhythm. The restroom became a strategic challenge. Use the stall, wash hands quickly in the corner sink, eyes downcast. Listening intently, I heard only the mundane hum of fluorescent lights, the squeak of unseen shoes. Back at my desk, my supervisor inquired about my well-being. "Just tired," I mumbled. He advised rest. I nodded, offering nothing more. The day bled away. Returning home felt like stepping back into the lion's den. The lock clicked shut. The draped mirrors held their positions. The overhead lights exposed the living room's static tableau. Fetching water from the fridge, my gaze snagged on the microwave's dark glass panel. My reflection stood there, and behind it, undeniably, the silhouette. Larger now, closer, hovering near my shoulders. My breath hitched, a dizzying spin. Nothing. I pressed my palms against my eyes, fighting vertigo, gripping the counter for support. Panic threatened to engulf me. I needed to anchor myself. The television became my focus again, a flickering portal to normalcy. Hours passed in a blur of mindless channel surfing. Around 10, I switched it off, plunging the screen into darkness. My reflection stared back, my face ordinary, but behind it, the tenebrous shape solidified. I leaned closer. The form seemed to incline its head, observing me with unseen eyes. A full-body rigidity seized me. I sprang up, whirling around, empty air. Back to the screen. Gone. My pulse raged, a painful throb in my throat. Passivity was no longer an option. Duct tape emerged from a drawer, wielded like a weapon. I began sealing every reflective surface. The television screen, the microwave door, the glass of picture frames, even the small gleam of the faucet. I double-checked the covered mirrors. When finished, the apartment looked absurd, bandaged against itself, but a sliver of control returned. Leaning against the wall, breathing hard, the relief was palpable, though the whispers persisted. My name, stretched and soft, insidious. Music through headphones offered a temporary shield. I managed a few bites of food. Exhaustion warred with hypervigilance on the sofa. My body ached with sustained tension, neck stiff, shoulders knotted. Knuckles cracked, legs trembled. Noticing the faint sheen on my phone's dark screen, I turned it on. Brightness cranked high, banishing even that small portal. Eventually, sleep ambushed me there. Waking was gradual, into the pale light of early morning filtering through the windows, themselves reflective, a fact I tried desperately to ignore. Jacket on, keys in hand, I fled the apartment. Walking the neighborhood block, eyes downcast, I passed storefronts. Habit, insidious habit, made me glance at one. My reflection, and behind it, stark in the daylight, the shadow figure. My stomach revolted. I stagger, nearly falling, eliciting a concerned query from a passerby. A mumbled excuse, and I hurried away, heart pounding. Back inside, the reality struck. I had to endure this until the appointment. A surge of impotent fury rose. I wanted to shatter every reflective surface, yet feared it would make no difference. Water, pacing, the faint whispers mocking my movements. Cold drafts ghosted past, though the windows remained sealed. Cleaning became a frantic displacement activity, scrubbing, wiping, sweeping, punctuated by the sibilant hiss of my name that made me jump each time, pulse skyrocketing. Night descended again, and with it, weary resignation. I sat on the sofa, guarding my gaze from any inadvertently uncovered surface. Taped and shrouded, the apartment still felt charged, peripheral flickers suggesting movement just beyond sight. Muscles perpetually clenched, throat tight. Quick, hopeful head turns revealed only emptiness. "This is temporary," I chanted inwardly. "Help is coming." Later, the bathroom ritual. Brushing my teeth required peeling back a corner of the towel. I focused on my mouth, avoiding my own eyes. Then, my name, louder this time, sharper. My shoulders spasmed, spitting, rinsing, head bowed. A distinct coldness bloomed behind me. The overhead light flickered once, violently. I forced myself to look. My reflection met my gaze, its movements lagging by a horrifying half-second. And behind it, the shadow, coalescing, hinting at blurred features within its darkness. My heart felt poised to burst. A ragged breath escaped me. The toothbrush slipped from my nerveless fingers, clattering into the basin. My reflection stooped to retrieve it fractionally after I did. A grotesque, asynchronous mime. The shadow's outline seemed to ripple. A faint, dry scraping sound filled the air, like fingernails on stone. A strangled cry tore from me as I stumbled backward out of the bathroom, leaving the light burning defiantly in the empty room. So now I sit, sofa-bound, documenting this descent, needing to anchor the details before they dissolve into madness, before the doctor hears my fragmented tale. Even as I write, I feel it. Cold air caressing my neck. Though the room is still, the windows shut tight. The whispers persist. My name breathed on the exhale. A parasitic cadence tied to my own life breath. My chest is a knot of iron. My eyes sting. Tremors rack my body, sweat tracing cold paths down my spine. What tonight holds, I cannot fathom. Whether the tape and towels possess any true power now seems doubtful, yet I cling to the ritual. I will remain here, bathed in light, until the sun asserts its dominance. Then, the appointment. I am resolved to unearth the root of this unraveling. If it persists, a life devoid of reflections, an impossibility I daren't contemplate. For now, the struggle is to remain calm, coherent. My hands feel distant, numb. My head spins. How much more pressure can the mind withstand before it fractures entirely? I don't know, but I must hold on. I pray the shadow, the whispers, remain just this side of tangible. If they intensify, escape from this apartment, from myself, may become the only desperate option left. The phantom roar of the afternoon's crowd lingered, a spectral vibration in the vast emptiness of Colossus Arena, now surrendered to a profound, echoing stillness. My flashlight carved a solitary path through the gloom as I traced my circuit, a prickling unease crawling up my spine. Perhaps it was the way shadows writhed just beyond the beam's edge, or the susurrus of whispers that seemed to snag on the night air. Whatever its source, this shift felt charged, pregnant with deviation. Leo's the name. 3 years I've walked these concrete canyons after dark, guarding the slumbering giant. Night watch isn't the stuff of dreams, but it keeps the lights on. Usually it's just me, the hum of the cleaning crew's buffer down distant corridors. maybe a feral cat scavenging beneath the bleachers. But this night possessed a different texture. It began near the stroke of midnight. During my customary sweep of the perimeter, my light snagged on an anomaly in the far reaches of the parking expanse. A battered panel truck hunkered down in Section E. An innocuous sight, perhaps, save for its sudden appearance in a space vacant merely an hour before. I keyed my radio, the static briefly shattering the quiet. "Sal, you catching that truck? E-lot, corner." A pause, then Sal's voice filtered through the receiver. "Affirmative, Leo. Got eyes on it. Stationary. Want me to keep watch?" "Yeah, appreciate it. Going to amble over for a look-see." I moved with practiced quiet, my hand hovering near the stun device clipped to my belt. Closer, the truck revealed its history. Once white, now scabbed with rust, its paint faded to the color of old dishwater. The windows were blacked out, impenetrable voids. Just as my knuckles lifted to rap against the glass, muffled voices drifted from behind the arena structure. Instinct coiled tight in my gut. I melted behind a parked sedan, straining to decipher the words cutting through the stillness. "You certain this is the spot?" one voice rumbled, low and gravelly. "Absolutely. Skeleton crew security. Jackpot inside. Just gotta slip past the watchers," answered a second, sharper tone. My pulse leapt, a frantic drummer against my ribs. Not lost fans stumbling back, nor teenagers seeking illicit thrills. This resonated with something calculated, something dangerous. I raised the radio again, my voice a tight whisper. "Sal, situation developing. Multiple subjects, planning entry. Notify the Blues, but tell them silent approach. No lights, no sirens." "God, Leo, are you sure?" Sal's voice was tight with alarm. "Positive as sunrise, just make the call." Edging nearer the sound, I navigated the dim parking lot geometry, seeking visual confirmation. 3 silhouettes materialized near a service entrance, huddled in conspiracy. One figure worked intently at the lock mechanism, while the others scanned the surroundings. A faint snick echoed. The door yielded. The trio vanished inside. A choice presented itself, stark and immediate. Await reinforcements or pursue. Prudence screamed cut, but the thought of them reaching the administrative safe, disabling the cameras. Delay could mean failure. A deep breath, a decision forged in adrenaline. I slipped through the breached door, my own footfall suddenly loud in the cavernous service tunnel. Ahead, their voices ricocheted off the poured concrete, guiding me. They were angling towards the administrative wing, the location of the arena's nerve center and its vault. Rounding a bend, I caught sight of them. 3 men clad in dark attire, burdened with duffel bags. A glint of metal tucked into one man's waistband. A firearm. My mouth turned to dust. This escalated far beyond my pay scale, yet retreat felt impossible now. I shadowed them, hugging the deepest pools of darkness, a ghost in their wake. They reached the targeted office door, the lock yielding quickly to practiced hands. "Sal," I breathed into the radio. "They're at the main admin office. ETA on the cavalry." 5 minutes, Sal hissed back. "Leo, watch your ass." The door swung inward. They disappeared inside. I crept forward, taking position just outside the frame, listening to the sounds of hurried searching. Drawers yanked open, papers rustled, frustrated mutters. "Has to be in here," one growled. "Try behind the landscape painting," another suggested. A scraping noise, then a low, triumphant laugh. "Bingo!" My stomach plummeted. The safe. It was now or never. Drawing another steadying breath, I stepped into the doorway, stun device leveled. "Hold it! Arena security!" They spun, faces masks of disbelief in the spill of corridor light. A frozen tableau held for a heartbeat, then shattered into chaos. One lunged, a blur of motion. Another clawed at his waistband for the gun. I triggered the stun device. A crackle, a sharp blue arc. The lunging man crumpled, twitching violently on the floor. The gunman had his weapon free, its muzzle gaping directly at me. Time warped, stretching thin. I saw his knuckle whiten on the trigger, felt the impending concussion. Before the shot could break the tension, a cacophony erupted behind me. Boots pounding, shouts, flashlight beams slashing the darkness. The reinforcements had arrived. "Police! Drop your weapons now!" The ensuing moments dissolved into a controlled storm of activity. The remaining two intruders were swiftly overpowered, wrestled into cuffs. I found myself slumped in an office chair, recounting the events to a stern-faced detective, while paramedics performed a cursory check. As the adrenaline tide receded, the stark reality washed over me. I'd blundered into a significant heist, nearly paying the ultimate price. The detective, a seasoned man named Martel, with weary eyes, regarded me with a blend of approval and exasperation. "You took a hellacious gamble, son, but because of it, we nabbed this crew red-handed. They're tied to a string of stadium jobs up and down the coast." I managed a nod, feeling strangely detached. "Just doing my job, detective." Martel offered a gruff chuckle. "Your job just cracked a case we've chased for months. Be proud of that." Later, as the first hints of dawn painted the eastern sky, the police vehicles finally departed. Sal materialized beside me in the emptying parking lot, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. "You're either the gutsiest damn fool or the luckiest I know," he declared, shaking his head. Not sure I'd have plunged in like that. A faint smile touched my lips. I shrugged. "Honestly, Sal, not sure I would again either. But right then, it felt like the only move." He nodded, a flicker of understanding in his gaze. "Well, glad you're intact. And hey, maybe Brass throws a promotion your way." We shared a brief tension-easing laugh. Driving home through the awakening city, the night's events flickered like a faulty projector in my mind. I'd always seen myself as an ordinary guy clocking in for an ordinary gig, but for a few intense hours I'd been something else. I'd intersected with consequence. The fear, the surge of action, the eventual relief, it was all seared into me now. I knew with certainty that every future shift would be different, viewed through this new lens. Each shadow a potential concealment, every unexpected noise a harbinger. Yet, pulling into my driveway, bone-weary but strangely vitalized, a realization settled. I could live with that, because I now understood my own capacity. When pressed to the wall, I hadn't folded. As I collapsed into bed, sunlight striping the room, I closed my eyes, not entirely unhappy. The night had irrevocably altered me, and whatever tomorrow held, I felt strangely prepared. Sometimes, in the deepest quiet of the night, long after the crowds disperse, unlikely figures step briefly into the light. And for one night, that figure had been me.